Okay, the first thing, or the next one that we're going to deal with is considering the acceptance of the UHY independent audit of March 31, 2022 financial statements. If you guys want to just introduce yourself. How is Lorraine? What are you doing? How did that happen?
That's what we said.
First of all, I want to thank you guys for dealing with, Jason is a talker, as you can see. Anybody who's ever seen our finance director at these meetings, he is a man of many words back there. So it was probably very hard, but no,
thank you. I'm Mike Santicha, partner at UHY, along with Marlene Beach and Lorraine Moravsky back there. We'll present our audit of March 31. And you've got copies of the financial statements. We're just going to do a brief PowerPoint presentation to hit some of the highlights of the audit. So the following presentation represents a summary of the overall government activities and business type activities of Bloomfield Township. The specific fund presentation slides detail certain but not all of the funds, as noted in the slide titled Independent Auditor's Report. The audit of the township included the governmental activities, the business type activities, the aggregate discretely presented component unit, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of Bloomfield Township. The township funds that were audited as part of this year's audit are on this slide here, and we highlighted the major funds: general, road, public safety, special assessment fund, the pension obligation bond debt fund, and the water and sewer fund. But the remainder were all the other funds that were included in our audit. Auditing standards require that we communicate certain items to the Board of Trustees. Again, we audited the financial statements, as we said, and we issued an unmodified opinion, again, which is the highest level of opinion that we can issue. The accounting standards also say there's certain responsibilities. We communicated some of those in our engagement letter dated in May, but there's also others that we need to communicate to you. The accounting policies, which you'll find in note 1 of our package, are management's responsibility to select and use. As part of our audit, we make sure you are following those policies, which you were. Same with the estimates. It's up to management to come up with those estimates. And again, as part of our audit, we make sure those estimates are reasonable. And they were. Pleased to report there were no audit adjustments. So that's a very good sign that the numbers that you're looking at are good to make decisions as you go along monthly. So that's a very good job. So we thank Jason for that. There was no disagreements with Township's management over the course of our audit. To our knowledge, there was no other consultations with any other auditors during the audit, and there were no issues discussed with management prior to our appointment. There were no difficulties encountered. One of the things we do look for is when we ask for certain items, we got those quickly from Jason and his team, which shows us that he had all the documentation that we required, so that's a good sign. They were very prepared, and Jason gave us all the time we needed during the audit. Some other items: we did conduct fraud interviews with management team and a board trustee. No instances of fraud were reported to us. Items, again, like I mentioned, items tested during the audit had sufficient and appropriate audit support, which included documentation and more importantly, approval of those items. We also tested expense reimbursements. All the items tested as part of that audit had sufficient and appropriate support with it and approval. And we also looked at the credit card statements, and again, we tested part of that, and each one had sufficient and appropriate audit support, again, with proper documentation and approval. Some of the highlights: the OPEB and pension liabilities are primary factors causing the negative net position in the government activities. We'll have some more information on those in the following slides. There was no expenditures in excess of the required budget amounts. The township was awarded $4.4 million in ARPA funds. of which 2.2 million was received during our fiscal year that we audited. And as of March 31, none of these funds had been allocated or spent, and the remainder of the ARPA funds were received in May of 2022. Some significant capital purchases included police vehicles, plow trucks, safety equipment, safety path construction, and improvement to water and sewer infrastructure. So on the OPEB, what we wanted to show is what happened since we had information from 2018 on. We were funded at about 7% back in 2018. Currently, we're at about 22%. So that is very high in the other municipalities that we do. So that's a very good sign. Pension is the same. As you can see, we're now funded about 90%, slight drop. That comes in with the market rates and things like that as assets go up and down. Now Marlene will do the heavy lifting with the,
I can do it. I can handle both. Okay, this first slide is the township as a whole. What this represents is all the activities of the township. Doesn't include things, as Mike mentioned, pension, the long-term liabilities. And as you notice down the bottom, there is the net pension deficit that Mike showed. Your OPEB liability is about 81 million and approximately 24 million for the pension liabilities, which puts that into the negative position. Again, these are not new liabilities, just been on the balance sheet now for a few years. Some things that are also when there's your long-term debt gets included in the statements, which aren't normally, they're not a part of your fund statement. So that's what kind of drives the negative unrestricted fund balance. That's not unusual. Almost every one of the government entities that we do audit does have a negative unrestricted when it goes into the township as a whole. And almost everybody's is caused by pension and OPEB. Okay, the first one was basically the balance sheet, which is the snapshot as of March 31st, 2022. This one shows revenues, and remember your revenues are, a function throughout the year. Total revenue about 61 in 2022 for your governmental activities, and just about 61. So we were at 62, now down 61 in 2020. So a slight increase in revenues. And we do have slides that detail some specific funds, so you'll be able to see some of the differences on those slides. Again, this is the township as a whole. So you have revenues, you have to have expenditures. Total program expenses in 2021 were about 32.4. Program expenses in 2022 were about 34.5. So we did have a little bit increase there. Your change in net position, which is a direct relationship of your revenues over your expenditures, was close to 27 million. So that's the increase in the net position. Once again, goes back to the township as a whole. Now we're getting into the specific funds themselves. Once again, funds do not include things like OPEB and pension and your long-term debt. So if you look at your assets in 2021 versus 2022, they're about 15.5 in 2021. You're now at 18.4. General fund liabilities, you're going to see something unique from this year that was not on there last year. You see unearned revenue in the ARPA funds. Okay, those are the funds that Mike mentioned that have come in yet, but were not spent or allocated. So they're put into unearned revenue, which is a liability until they're spent. As you start using them, then they'll be reflected in the revenue and expenditures as they're spent. So that's what that liability is. It's not money, it's money that you already have that you'll be using on projects in the future. That's why at this time it's a liability, and that's the difference in your liabilities from 2021 to 2022. Fund balance went from 15.2 to about 15.7 in your general fund. What we're doing with this slide is just kind of comparing 2022 to 2021. You can see the blue is 2022, the yellow is 2021. Did have a slight increase in tax revenue. State shared revenue was up this year. Grants were down. There were grants last year, which included the CARES Act. Again, your ARPA is not shown there because on the previous slide, remember that's deferred revenue, so it is not counted as revenue in that year. So revenue in 2021 was about 18.2. This year, it's about 19.1. Same type of slide. This time we're just showing expenditures. Expenditures in 2021 were about 9.4 million. Now we're looking at about approximately 9.7 million. A slight increase in your general government expenditures. Again, 2022, we are seeing kind of a return to somewhat normal operations. Remember 2021, a lot of things were still shut down. As Mike mentioned, we also we do audit all the funds, but water and sewer is one of the major funds. It's listed on the financial statements. Total assets of your water fund this year are about 97 million compared to 94 last year. Big difference in the balance right here is your marketable securities are up. So assets are what you own, liabilities are what you owe. You had liabilities last year of about 3.7 million. This year they're just slightly up to 4.1. Most of that is a function of when things are paid. Your accounts payable and accrued expenses went up. If we'd have done this 4 days later, we may have seen a change. So liabilities are basically a function of the timing when things are paid. Total liabilities in 2021 were about 22 million. This year they're about 21.4. Bottom line you want to look at is your net position. Net position is basically what's left after your assets minus your liabilities. In 2021, you were at 67.6. This year, you're at almost 74 million. And here's a depiction of the revenues. Once again, blue is 2022. Our yellow is 2021. Water sales were actually down this year. We are seeing that trend also as people kind of return to work. Previously in 2021, we had a lot of people at home, so we were seeing water usage change from entities to entities depending on where people worked. So we have seen that's a typical thing we are seeing across the board in other communities. And sewer usage is not a direct correlation, but pretty darn close to a direct correlation with your water usage. So your revenues in 2021 were about 30 million. We're down to about 30.5 in 2022. Expenditures were almost consistent. We've got 23.1 in 2021 and 23.5. As you would expect, if you had less water sales, you would have less water purchased, which we did see. Big function in this one is you do see depreciation. Depreciation is part of the water and sewer expenditure report. So you've got, each year, your depreciation is about $2.3 million. Another one of the major funds was the road funds. Total assets in the road funds were 2.8 last year, and you're looking at about 2.9 this year. And we've got our liabilities and fund balance. If you go down to the bottom, the total fund balance is 2.701 in 2021. This year you're looking at 2.725. So you did have a slight increase in the road fund. And once again, we do depict the revenues and expenditures. Revenues in 2021 were 3.710. This year they're 3.750. So fairly consistent. If you look at the two, all the bar charts, they're almost identical. Expenditures in the road fund relate exactly to that, what you spent for road repairs. So we've got 3.5 last year. Once again, people are out doing things, so now we're looking at 4.3, so an increase in road expenditures. Another one of your major funds is public safety fund. Look at total assets are almost identical. 15.011 last year, 15.116, so very little change in the total assets of your public safety fund. Once again, we're showing the liabilities. Once again, you're seeing a liability for unearned revenue. Means grant money has come in that has not been allocated or spent yet. So it's a liability until you make that expenditure. So once the fire truck payments are made, you will see that liability recorded as revenue and expense for the next year. Fund balance in your public safety fund, 2021 was just under 14 million. 2022, you're just over. So we did see a slight increase. Just again, we saw on the other slides, revenue is very similar here from year to year. Big difference from 2021 to 2022 is grants. There was a lot of the CARES money came through in 2021. So again, as that's spent, it would be recorded as revenue. So that's the main difference between 2021 and 2022. Again, oops, a little too high. Your expenditures are also fairly consistent from year to year. Last year, capital outlay of about 1.3, which was related to the fire trucks, which if you go back was also grant related. This year had a very 176, so quite a decrease in your capital outlay for your public expenditure funds.
And your financial statements have been timely submitted to the state, so you've got that also. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions? Michael?
I do. A few things. First of all, thank you all for your hard work and keeping us honest, since that's what the audit does. A question here on the slide number 7. You highlighted 6 funds and then listed, call it 15 others. I think I know the answer to this, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear that you audited all of these funds.
Correct.
We just highlighted.
You highlighted just the major funds, and
but all
that's the
these
one,
funds were included.
right? Because you only showed those during the presentation,
those
right?
are the
Okay,
major.
so I just
All
wanted to
these
be
other
clear
funds-
that no, you audited every fund.
Every fund
Correct.
that's on, yes.
Okay. And you said no expenditures in excess of required budget amounts. Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, you're not required to budget every fund, but every fund that we looked at, which is your major funds, we did not find expenditures in excess of the budgeted amount.
Okay, so we only spent what was budgeted,
Correct.
or less.
Or less.
less.
Correct. Yes.
Good. Okay. On the township as a whole balance sheet, we obviously have a large deficit, and I just wanted to be clear about this and make it clear for everybody that we only include the net liability for pension and OPEB. We don't show the total assets and the total liabilities, because when you look at this and you see, oh, they got a big deficit with a big liability, well, where are the assets? I don't want somebody running in here saying, where are the assets, right? All we're showing is the net.
The net liability,
The
correct.
net liability. So our liability in pension exceeds our assets. Our OPEB liability exceeds our assets. We only show that net amount
Correct.
in this statement. Okay,
Right, so the actuary determines what that liability is.
Right.
And then we net the assets that you have.
right. So we do have the assets.
Correct.
They're just we're
Correct.
only
So
showing the
that's why
net.
we had that one slide where we showed the assets and
Yep.
funds, so that you do have that.
Okay. Just want to clarify that for those watching at home. And
Big following.
you know, it's going to spike to like 10 people tonight.
Exciting topic.
Huge.
My last question is the same one I ask Marlene every year. This says that you are a firefighter at EMT. No, this is not the one I ask you every year.
Yes, I am. That's correct.
That's pretty impressive. What's more impressive is that you're a certified fraud examiner.
That is correct also.
And so, in looking and conducting the audit, there wasn't anything that you sniffed out that you felt that we should be concerned about.
No, nothing came to our attention that we thought that we saw that would even require further looking into. There was no instances whatsoever.
Right.
No.
And you're a certified fire instructor. Do you still teach?
Occasionally.
Okay.
She does keep that up.
Yes.
She might need, if you need somebody.
Yes.
She is the only
Yeah.
CPA that is a firefighter EMT, so.
That is
Okay.
And she can play taps.
Yes.
That's
Kind of
impressive.
well-rounded in that whole.
Well-rounded. Okay. In a good way. Okay. Those are my questions.
Anyone else have questions? Anyone? I would just want to point out that you helped with, I know we all have dealt with the water sewer questions. It went to the Supreme Court. You still get one or two that are convinced there's something there, but I just want to point out, thank you for going in even deeper as we asked them to go even deeper to see if there really was. So thank you. And saying like the highest level was what we wanted to know, that we were at a high level. You mentioned no audit adjustments. Is that common to get no audit adjustments? Or is that kind of like
No,
we're
that
kind
is
of a
not-
dream
That's
team up
more on
here?
the rare side.
Yes.
Okay.
Audit adjustments.
Okay.
Some places we see we have double digits, so.
There's a bunch of department heads here, so you guys guessed very well last year. Let's do it again because we're in budget season is starting again.
So Jason and
Okay.
his team do very well, so.
Yeah.
We do appreciate that.
And then with the ARPA, I know we weren't spending it right away because it was so limited, and now we can spend it on actual things that we need instead of the two things the government thought we needed, which was frustrating. So I'm glad we waited it out next year, just to wrap my head around it. If we're just starting the study sessions and the budget season, so likely we will be picking some ARPA fund things this year. Is it $750,000 or higher where the special audit, where if we use $750,000 of federal money, you will have to do a separate audit on that grant money?
Yeah, it's called a single audit. So if
Single
you
audit.
expend $750,000, those come into play.
But that's not specific. It's not a program. If you spend more than $750,000 in federal funds, it
Yeah.
triggers a single audit. There are special rules
Okay.
if with the ARPA funds that if it ticks you over, then you can just get the compliance audit. I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, and we probably will be spending more on that. I just want to get that out there for the fans watching. If there's another audit, we
No,
didn't do anything
more than likely
wrong.
will
Oh, and
It is
again,
a
that-
rule.
That's from the federal
Okay.
government saying, are these funds? So we look at what programs you're spending it on.
Right.
Does it comply? So we test those expenditures
Okay,
to
perfect.
make sure they're proper.
I'm guessing there'll be some. We had about $42 million worth of requests
Yes.
for our $4 million, so I'm sure it'll be spent. Let's see, those are my last. I think those are my only questions. Nobody else had any others? Great, then do we have to vote to accept it?
Motion to accept.
Does it have to be a roll call?
No.
Oh, did you have something
No,
else?
I was gonna make a motion
Sure.
to accept the audit and thank you for your work.
Motion
Support.
by Treasurer Keefe, support by Trustee Shostak. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
And also Lorraine, who's hiding in the back. Thank you. All right, perfect.